Hey there, Alex Kidman with my quick video review of the Nokia 8.3 5G. Now you could describe this phone a whole bunch of different ways. You could call it the Bond phone because HMD Global, the people who do the Nokia branded phones, cut a deal for this to be the official phone of the latest Bond flick. But you could also call it a really unlucky phone because, rather like that Bond film, this got significantly delayed. So while HMD were amongst the first to announce a Snapdragon 765 based 5G handset earlier in the year, it's only really now come to Australian shores. It's been delayed significantly. I mean, not quite so much as Bond has, but, close enough, really. So they don't get that big tie-in. The other thing, of course, you could describe it as a big pixel phone, and I'll get into why shortly. Still, this is Nokia's flagship phone, and that's an important distinction because most of the Nokia phones that you can buy are much more affordable fare, mid-range, or in fact budget devices, as well as, of course, those throwback iOS devices that everyone seems to love. And this isn't that. This is an $899 Australian phone, and that puts it in the high mid-range. It's not quite flagship money. We usually define that as above $1,000. So what do you get for your money, and is it worth it? Well, here's the things that I like. Broadly, I like the design. You're talking a 6.81-inch display with a small punch hole camera in the top side. It's a nice enough panel. There's a bit of a jutting chin there for the Nokia logo, but otherwise it presents quite well. Side-mounted fingerprint sensor. Now, that's a matter of taste. There is a design element I don't like, but it's not the fingerprint sensor. The fingerprint sensor is just okay. I probably would have preferred in glass, but I'll take it. It works well enough. HMD Global only makes it in this single polar blue colour. Now, I'm a noted sucker for blue phones. I really do like this. It has a nice effect to it. The blue looks really good. Like most phones of this type, though, it's a real fingerprint magnet, so maybe a case would still be a good idea. Like almost every other mid-range 5G phone, it's based on the Snapdragon 765G chipset, which means its performance is entirely expected. It absolutely benchmarks. It's basically exactly the same as pretty much every other Snapdragon 765G phone, and my goodness, there's a lot of those now. When this was announced, of course, there weren't quite so many. It's the whole unlucky thing. But still, the performance is really good, and it's actually accentuated by the fact that this is an Android One phone. So why does Android One matter? Well, Android One matters because it basically hands control back over to Google, saying, hey, here's a clean, almost pixel-like Android interface. You can do anything you like to it. You can throw other launchers onto it. But I like clean Google myself, and I like the ability to then customize Android to be what I want it to be, not what a manufacturer wants it to be. The other big advantage, though, is that Android One phones get 2 years of guaranteed Android OS upgrades and 3 years of security upgrades. And that's a big thing. There's so many Android phones out there that barely see a sniff of the security upgrades. And if they do, they're months behind, let alone actual OS upgrades. Now, this is an Android 10 device, so it'll get Android 11 and Android 12 at least in due course. And it really does put it on a similar kind of track to Google's own Pixel phones. And I've been thinking about this for a while, and I think there's a big market here for this being an almost premium Pixel phone. I mean, let's face it, it's got the same kind of upgrade capabilities. Google's removing that free photo storage from, I think it's March next year. So that's out the window for Pixel owners. It's out the window for Nokia 8.3 owners as well. But it means they're on an even pegging there. And I think it delivers a better experience. The other big feature that I really, really adore is the battery life on this phone. Now, there's a 4,500 milliamp battery. Now, lots and lots of Android phones and lots of larger phones have that kind of battery capacity. Few of them have the battery endurance of this phone, though. It just runs and runs and runs. 2 days is really very, very easy to get. My own battery benchmarking suggests that this is just one of the top flight phones for battery life. And that's really important. Basically, a phone with no battery is just a slab after all. But this can bring plenty of battery life. It's really very, very good. Nokia claims that the Nokia 8.3 5G has more 5G band coverage worldwide than any other phone, or what they did back in March. Now, I can't test that worldwide because, well, have you met 2020? Nobody's travelling anywhere. I can't even test that here because where I'm shooting this has no actual 5G coverage. Otherwise, I would show you the kind of speeds you might hit. But I have a solution for that. which is why I've driven somewhere else in Sydney to do a little bit of 5G testing. So I'm in a 5G area now, testing with Telstra. And look, I'm not expecting huge things out of the 765G in the Nokia 8.3. I've tested a bunch of these and they all tend to hit somewhere between 200 to 400, typically, sometimes a little higher, sometimes a little lower. Let's see how this one does. Yeah, that's pretty much bang on what I'd expect. We should see a pretty massive difference as well between those download and upload speeds. 5G, most mobile networks really are massively asymmetrical that way because people do care more about their downloads than their uploads. And yeah, look, this is all totally well within what I would expect to see out of this kind of device in these kinds of situations. And look, I can't say much more about the 5G speeds. It can do it. I don't feel like 5G is all that vital just yet, but there you have it. And now I'll jump back to the studio. And thanks for that live cross. Straight back to me. Smooth. So 5G is okay. The design is pretty good. Those Android updates are really very, very nice. So what's not to like? Well, look, there are a few elements that I'm not as keen on. In design terms, I can live with the fingerprint sensor on the side. What I can't live with, what I really, really dislike, is this Google Assistant button on the other side. It's not just that there's a Google Assistant button. I don't use them much, and maybe you do, and that's fine. It's the positioning and placement. It is directly opposite the fingerprint sensor, which is also the power button. And what this means is that almost inevitably, you're going to press this thing, and Google Assistant is going to flash up again and again and again. It's truly annoying. Now, you can disable it, but that's all you can do. You can't even remap it to be some other useful button function. I wish at least they had placed it a little higher or lower on the phone so it was less likely to get accidentally tapped. I really wish they just allowed you to remap it to a more useful function, but they haven't. And then there's the cameras. Now, Nokia has a tie-up with Zeiss for the lenses on its phones. And typically, Nokia has promised a lot and never quite hit that level. And sadly, the reality for the 8.3 is I still don't think they're quite where they want to claim they are, quite where their marketing material would say they are. Which is not to say that this is a bad camera. It's not. There's a primary 64 megapixel lens, a secondary ultra-wide lens, and then a macro lens. And look, that's not a bad recipe in terms of performance or in terms of features, but it's also not one that's particularly stunning for a $900 phone. Results are generally okay. It's a little bit better as a video shooter than it is as a straight stills camera, but coming off other 5G phones I've tested recently, like for example, the Samsung Galaxy S20 FE, that thing shot really well and gave me a lot of flexibility. This gives me a lot less, especially with that macro lens. There must be a ton of those 2 megapixel macro modules sitting in a factory somewhere in China, because it seems like every phone at the moment has one of them, and none of them are terribly spectacular. You've got to put so much work into getting a reasonable shot, and even then, quite often, it just doesn't come off. Nokia still has some work to do to really wow me on the camera front, and I wish this had, but it just didn't. So who's this phone for? Well, I think the core market for this are folks who were a little bit underwhelmed by the Pixel 5 and the Pixel 4a 5G, because this has the same advantages in terms of upgrades and clean UI, and you can do with it as you want, but it's got a much, much nicer design overall, that Google Assistant button notwithstanding. It's got way better battery life, and it just looks a whole lot nicer. I really like it an awful lot. There's a lot of choice, though, in that 5G space. I totally encourage you to look around and look at the offerings from Motorola and Oppo and Google, indeed. See what you can get in terms of currency and pricing. But as it stands, this is absolutely a top-flight contender in that mid-range space and comes recommended. Anyway, that's my take on the Nokia 8.3 5G. What do you think? Have you got one? Are you keen on it? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching through to the end. Don't forget to hit that like button and that subscribe button too.